Danny Gorfine, the first thing I have to do is chastise you.
Please do.
How many times have you been in Palm Beach in the last 10, 12 years?
Oh boy. Next question, please.
Why didn't I get a phone call? Why couldn't I take you out to lunch or dinner? Why didn't I get...
Because I knew that you would probably ask me to play tennis and I would be thoroughly embarrassed and humiliated on the tennis court. That's my excuse.
Okay, I'll accept that. Okay, Dan, it's 8th grade, graduation, it's all over. Take us from there on your educational journey.
My educational journey. Well, let me first start by saying it was a wonderful, was it 8-9 years at Palm Beach Day School? What a great place. What a great education. I will come back at some point in the conversation today to share some of the things that you imparted on me that have had a huge impact. So first, before I gloss past Palm Beach Day, let me say what a great experience it was. From there, I went to the St. Andrews School in Boca Raton, Florida, for high school. So I was at St. Andrews for 4 years, remained very close with a number of Palm Beach Day alums when I was at St. Andrews, including Luis Sorotsky, Jeff Rappaport was there, Eric Verratti, and a former classmate, Sari Chait, were all at Palm Beach, at St. Andrews with me. From St. Andrews, I went to Brown University for undergraduate. I was a double major in international relations and business economics. And perhaps most importantly, I met my future wife at Brown. We began to date my senior year and have been together ever since. So should I continue? Should I keep going through the education?
Yeah, everything, whatever's, I want to know all about you, all about your education, what you did, your honors, etc., law school, business.
All right. Well, okay. So I will go back and say, so for high school, I did finish as valedictorian of the school. So again, compliment my elementary upbringing to have prepared me for high school. And then after Brown, I moved down to Washington, D.C., where I did a 4-year joint JD, so law school and master's program. I went to the George Washington University Law School and combined that with the Johns Hopkins School for Advanced International Studies, SICE. So by doing it as a joint degree, I was able to do it in 4 years instead of the 5 years it would typically take for the JD and the master's. So that was something that I had always aspired to do, especially SICE. I wasn't convinced in the early days about law school, but it seemed like the wise thing to do in combination with my master's program.
Well, GW, great school, great school. I have some wonderful memories because when I was at Maryland, way before you were born, we played them every year in basketball.
That's right.
We had great games with them, great games with the GW.
They actually have a pretty decent basketball team. I did catch a few games when I was there as well, although the other Georgetown's had some more success in recent years.
Right. Okay, so now you're finished with law school, you're ready to start your commercial career, right?
Well, what I did is I somewhat postponed the full jumping into the commercial world by clerking for a federal judge. So I clerked for a judge named Kathy Blake in the District of Maryland. And so I was in Baltimore for 1 year. And my soon-to-be wife, who I'd mentioned I met at Brown, she was pursuing a joint degree, getting her MBA and her master's in public health at Johns Hopkins at the Bloomberg School. So we were both in Baltimore for a year. So I clerked for a federal judge for a year. At the end of that year, we were excited to move back to the DC area. And I started up at an international law firm called Covington and Burling. So I began primarily as a litigation associate. But as I mentioned, I had this background in my master's in international affairs. So I got to do some pretty interesting international litigation, international arbitration work. Believe it or not, it involved Chiquita Bananas was one of the cases I worked on. This was a fascinating Alien Tort Claims Act suit where there were thousands of Colombian plaintiffs who had actually sued Chiquita for decades of having been involved in, at sometimes making extortion payments to left-wing guerrillas, later in the future to right-wing paramilitaries. So quite a fascinating case to be involved in. I did that. I also worked on the NFL litigation. So if you remember back in, oh goodness, when was the NFL lockout? 2011, I want to say. So we actually represented the NFL owners in that case. It's one of those where, yeah, Well, as far as labor disputes go, kind of hard to pick between the millionaires and the billionaires. That's a very, very rare dynamic.
Listen, by the way, just as an aside here, if you get the chance, you can hook into our program here and see the interview I did with my favorite federal judge.
And who's that?
Robin Rosenberg.
Where is Robin Rosenberg?
She's a federal judge.
Of course.
Yeah.
In Florida?
Yeah.
Judge Rosenberg.
Judge Rosenberg, yes.
That's excellent.
Anyway,
I will have to go back and watch.
Tune in on it. You'll see her. Great. Wonderful kid. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No. So anyway, I was at the law firm for almost 4 years. But one of the things I had mentioned at the outset is I was very interested in policy, and that was the reason I did the master's program in international affairs. And I saw my career kind of heading down a very traditional kind of litigation law firm track. And that wasn't the reason I had come to DC in the first place. So I started to look around and say, it seems like the right point in my career where I should make sure I position myself to get involved more in the policy world. So at the time, there was a think tank that was headquartered in Santa Monica, California, but had actually just opened a new center in Washington, DC called the Center for Financial Markets. And I actually applied there to do financial market policy work. So I joined in, goodness, that would have been about 2012, I believe is when I joined. And it was a fascinating time because I got to the think tank and, we were new. We were kind of this upstart in Washington, D.C. up against, Brookings, and you had Cato and AEI and well-established think tank organizations that were doing a lot of work on financial market policy, whether it was too big to fail and housing finance reform, Dodd-Frank discussions. And quite frankly, Mr. Greco, I didn't think that anyone necessarily needed to hear young, Daniel Gorfine's voice about what he thinks on these issues that every other talking head was discussing. So I decided to look to see, what's new out in the world. What are people missing? What's the next thing? And at the time, there was new legislation called the Jobs Act that dealt with things like equity crowd investing and online accredited investor portals. And it was major changes to the securities laws. And so I took a real interest in that legislation and began a capital access program at the think tank. And, that ended up getting me into this world that I will now call fintech. It was kind of the early days of fintech or financial technology, these new types of online portals or platforms that were disrupting the way that we engage in traditional financial services, the way we pursue investments. And so I started doing think tank related work, writing op-eds and pulling together roundtables to discuss policy and making suggestions and recommendations to the SEC and how they should go about doing their job, using all of the great advocacy skills that you had imparted on us. But it looks like you have a question for me, so I'm going to pause.
No, I was just wondering, what's your take on this latest scandal on Wall Street that these people are pulling off with these hedge funds?
Well, it's fascinating. It's actually a very good point. Along with the positives of fintech is people will frequently say that you get the democratization of opportunity. And that's absolutely right. I mean, what you see happening is kind of a continuation of some of that early work I was doing in fintech, which is seeing how the internet continues to ripple through some of these traditional sectors. And the reality is it's very easy today for people to use the internet, social media, platforms in order to engage other individuals directly. You don't have those traditional gatekeepers or intermediaries necessarily that used to control access. And that can have some pros and cons. That's awesome power, which can be used very well. It can drive down costs. It can increase people's opportunity. But at the same time, it can create incredible platforms for groupthink and the ability to do what we've seen recently, which is start to move markets by people in Reddit chat rooms, commenting on what stock they want to bid up next. So it is a new world in a lot of ways. And actually that dynamic that you're flagging is something that I've kind of tracked throughout my career in fintech and policy, that's a real challenge, one where there's a lot of good that comes from it, but there's also some potential risks. And I think we're starting to see that.
Let me throw this question in.
Sure.
In the light of all of this that you've seen, et cetera, is there any legislation that's needed regarding Wall Street?
Regarding Wall Street, I don't know. I think that in this instance, it seems like the market has largely played itself out in that you had these parabolic rises in some of these stocks, but then they dropped just as precipitously in the week or so that followed. I think it's just going to be interesting. It's more to me around information and how information is being disseminated and consumed. And honestly, I think that as much as you see some risk of people going out there and kind of abusing the access to information and to disseminating information, there's also a lot of opportunity to share really positive models. And so you got to take the bad with the good.
Right.
I don't know what specifically would be done other than getting really into the weeds, some additional transparency on short positions and stuff that's pretty wonky. I think that what you saw in the last week with the hearings was a lot of political theater, and I'm not so sure that much actually comes out of it.
Right. Okay.
So shall I go back in time again?
Go on.
All right. So let's see. So anyway, here I was at the think tank and gradually built out what was considered one of the first fintech policy programs at think tank. And before that term was being used as much as it is today, we were one of the early organizations to really be thinking about the policy implications. And I stepped back from what started off on equity crowd investing in that particular area, and I started looking to see where else the internet was having this impact in financial markets and services. That was the early days of things like cryptocurrencies, digital payment platforms like Venmo, robo-advisory platforms, the use of machine learning and underwriting, whether for credit or for insurance. So yes, I had built out that broader fintech policy program. And from there, I had an opportunity in 2014 to join a fintech lending company that focused in the small business lending space. And it was quite an adventure because I joined them 3 weeks before they went public. So I got to see kind of the mania around an IPO and, how certain sectors could get quite hyped and quite hot for a period of time, which I certainly observed. Very interesting to see businesses like that also go through the rationalization process of realizing it's one thing to have a great idea and be in a hyped sector. It's another thing to build a viable, profitable, long-term business. And that's a very different set of considerations. From a policy perspective, I was heading up external and regulatory affairs for the company and got a front row seat at dealing with all three branches of government at both the federal and state level. The online marketplace lending space was a very hot topic, not just for the market, but also for regulators at the time. So yeah, please, I think I see you ready to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you hear the cliche all the time when at what point did you first have to meet a payroll?
Well, that's right. I mean, that's the thing is that, look, a lot of the tech companies today, they follow the Amazon model, right? Which is just gain scale, and worry about profits later. Yeah. That might work if you're Amazon, but for many businesses, you don't get that same leash where you get to run losses for 20 years. So that's an important lesson, and I share that with a lot of startups today to say, keep your eye on the ball. Though you need to actually have like a business model at the end of this. Yeah. So anyway, so I was at the fintech company for a little over 3 years. And then I ended up with this unbelievably fascinating opportunity, which I think only happens in Washington. I met with the chairman of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the Cftc, who was interested in launching a new financial technology and innovation office within a federal financial regulator. And when I sat down with him, I was able to share some of the things that I had written back during my time at the think tank, how I thought it was imperative that regulators kind of keep pace with changes in the market, make sure they really understand new technologies, understand where the new risks lie, as we were just talking about, where the opportunities are. And he essentially offered me an opportunity to come in and head up that innovation office, which was called Lab CFTC. So I was appointed to do that in 2017. I committed to him that I would come for about a 2-year period. I had a very kind of discrete idea in mind that I wanted to build out a bit of a blueprint or a model for how federal financial regulators can engage with fintech. And for me personally, I wanted to see the world from that perspective. I had been opining for years on what policymakers and regulators should be doing, and it's always easy to say, gosh, they're missing the mark. So here was a chance to actually have an impact from the inside.
So this was under the auspices of the government. You were under.
That's right. So this was, so Chris Giancarlo was the chairman of the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which regulates derivatives and futures and swaps markets. But, the SEC regulates stocks and bonds. The CFTC is the other side of the capital markets, derivatives and futures and swaps. From a tech perspective, though, going into it, I tried to see like what areas of technology am I going to be dealing with, but it's all the same from in terms of algorithmic trading and high frequency trading that you hear so much about, flash boys, all that kind of stuff applies equally to the CFTC markets. And then we also had the launch of Bitcoin futures products when I was there at the end of 2017. So we became the first financial regulator to be dealing hands-on with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and kind of saw the initial, I guess I'll call that the first big wave spike in the price of Bitcoin, which was back at the end of 2017 and 2018 when it hit $20,000. Now we've seen what's happened since, but I had another front row seat for that development.
You threw a word out there that I remember. It was burned into my brain, being not only completely ignorant of anything to do electronically, like with computers. Mrs. Close does all this. I do nothing with a computer, but also
you're doing very well right now.
Also finance, et cetera, et cetera. But I do remember in the big scandal, how many years ago was it? But the big boo-boo was the word that they were using, derivatives. And I could never understand what a derivative is. And I remember someone tried to explain it to me once, some parent who was a stockbroker, but never got through to me. But I do remember the word derivatives, and it was responsible for causing that whole breakdown of the
crisis
of the home.
Yeah, that was the now infamous AIG that was issuing what were effectively, so a derivative is a very broad term, all kinds of instruments. But in that case, they were basically offering insurance policies on the value of mortgage-backed, securities. So all these pools of mortgages, they were insuring the payment on them. And it was a great business. They would issue these effectively insurance policies. They were derivatives contracts, but they were credit default swaps is what you'd call them. So in the event of a default, they would pay out. And no one bothered to say, well, wait a minute, how many of these things are we writing? What happens if things go bad across the board? Well, guess what? Things happen. I'm going to keep this, G rated. So things happen. But that is what happens. And actually, it's interesting. So because of the financial crisis, and part of what Dodd-Frank did in terms of the legislation was build a far more robust CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. So a lot of the authorities that has grown kind of the importance of that agency came out of Dodd-Frank, and it was to make sure that products like the ones that AIG were issuing are actually being issued in a transparent way on either exchanges or being reported, so people have a sense for how much of this stuff is being written. But I'll give you a better way to know of the CFTC. You've seen Trading Places, right, with Eddie Murphy and Dan.
Yes.
Aykroyd? All right, you remember those pork bellies and that whole thing, orange
juice.
See, this is the best way to explain to people what the CFTC is all about. So CFTC regulates all of those commodity futures products. I'm buying orange juice today at this price, and then you're going to deliver it to me 6 months from now at that fixed price. And so markets use it to kind of transfer risk and hedge against changes in pricing. So the same happens now with things like Bitcoin, which is deemed a commodity. So those markets exist and those contracts are traded. And it was quite an experience. It was quite a time to be there. We got really thrust into a lot of major fintech and digital asset and crypto, all the stuff about crypto was something that my agency became heavily involved in. And as the guy who was supposed to be heading up the fintech office, I had to understand it quickly. So, I should have called my good buddy, Alex Rampell, who could have probably given me a very quick primer. But the good news is our worlds, our paths crossed again because of some of this work. So I've had the opportunity to be in touch with Alex over the last few years, which has been wonderful.
So anyway, I'm very impressed. Let me just say that. I'm very impressed. Always was. Okay, let's go back a few years. Let's go back to the day school.
Sure.
Some memories. Let's see. Do you remember your 8th grade final speech, your 10-minute speech?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I remember delivering it. Do I remember the content? No, I don't know that I
Okay,
do.
all right. Okay, do you remember it though? The 10-minute
Of course, of course.
speech?
Preparation, 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 Mr.
Preparation. Uh, you remember what was your favorite books we read?
Goodness, what was my favorite book?
You remember The Count of Monte Cristo?
It's funny you say that. I was actually going to jump to The Count of Monte Cristo. I was, in fact, I was. So Dickens, of course, has to pop into my mind, and I think of like David Copperfield, and think of like the 800-page tome that sat on my bed. But
you remember having to memorize 75 lines of Julius Caesar and
yes,
Bergerac?
Cyrano de Bergerac, of course. And I, if I recall, you gave a couple of very impassioned deliveries as well from that book.
Yes. Danny, I've had over the years, parents would come in and complain, and especially mothers. Very seldom did the father complain, but the mothers. And it would always be the same thing. How can you expect those kids to do that? That puts so much pressure on them and everything, etc. Why do you do that? Why do you do that? And I say, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, they can do it. And most of them do it. And after they do it, they say, I did it. I can do that.
That's
I can
right.
do that. It's just like getting up and giving a 10-minute speech under a time thing.
That's training.
Where you must maintain 100% eye contact during the introduction and conclusion, and 90% during the body of the speech. Well, how do you expect them to do that? Well, I don't know, but they do it. I've had people get up there 10 minutes, 5 seconds, or 5 seconds off.
It's critical.
I just tested myself once. I wrote up a speech for myself and I gave it. My wife, she timed it. I was 11 minutes, 30 seconds. I was a minute and a half over. I couldn't do it, but they did it. You people did it.
It was the best. And let me tell you something. I think all of us remember it, and it makes a difference. It absolutely makes a huge difference. And I will tell you, in my career, one of the things that I look for anybody that I look to work with or hire is around communication skills, whether they're written or spoken. And I feel it's a dying skill set. The quality of writing. I teach a law school course now actually at Georgetown, and we have some excellent students. But there are also many times where I'm surprised by the quality of writing. And public speaking is still one of the most important things that you can learn to do. It can be nerve-wracking. It's difficult. You have to overcome a lot of fears. And certainly at the age that we were in your class, I mean, you were nervous, you were scared, but that's okay. I think I recall you saying, coming in a few times for tests, is anybody nervous? Is anybody scared? Yes, I do remember that. But
on the memorizing part, in the last 15 years, I used to tell, before that, when parents would complain, I'd say, plus I want them to have memorized somewhere, it might stick, some of the most beautiful words in our language. It's up there. It's up there.
It makes it.
But in the last 15 years, I've added another plus. I say, and by the way, some of the readings I've done in physiology and psychology and brain work, some people feel that memorizing can be an inhibition to early onset Alzheimer's. So even if there's a chance that can help that, good, let's do it.
Let's do it. No, well, the brain, I say this to my girls all the time, to my kids. I say the brain is a muscle, and you have to exercise it, right?
Absolutely. How about, let's see, what else? The writing, remember the articles we had to do?
Oh, yes. I mean, we did a lot of writing with you, a lot of writing.
Some of them in Atlantic Monthly and Harper's.
Oh, I remember, yes.
Easy. And you had to write first paragraph, author's main ideas. That's all I wanted. That's comprehension.
Yep.
Second paragraph, give me your opinion. Give me your opinion. And they were tough. I understand. And I've had parents say, how do you expect 8th grade kids to be able to handle that? And I said, well, they're not going to handle, they're not going to get all of it, but that's okay. Something's going
That's
to
right.
be there. And they're
Well,
going to build on that.
And if I remember, I had you, 2 different years. I think we had you, was it 4th or 5th? Maybe 4th grade.
6 and 8.
Was it 6th and 8th then? Okay, so 6th grade, you did a good job of showing us that, hey, none of you in this class are better than getting a good healthy F every once in a while on a quiz or a test. And that's a great thing for all of us, who come in there with big egos and attitudes. It's humbling. But then by 8th grade, you kind of take the student and really build them and build their confidence so that they leave knowing that they can read, Dickens, so that they can give a 10-minute speech and memorize the vast majority of it. They can write.
Our school, one of the things in our school is we're trying to build critical thinkers. Critical thinkers. All right, what 4 things do you need to be a critical thinker? You got to be a good reader. Yep. You can't be a critical thinker if you're not a good reader, because just to get the information, the sophisticated. Number 2, you have to be a clear writer, not a great writer, a clear writer so that people can understand your ideas. And those are the 2 things that the school is basically interested in, our job. The 3rd thing to be a critical thinker, you have to be fair. Now, we try to do something here, but I'm sorry, but most of that's going to have to come from home, your environment, your social things, your church, your synagogue. That's what comes from there.
Yep.
That 4th thing you're going to have to be, and this 4th thing, so many of the kids identified with it. I say you're going to have some moral courage, because if you're a critical thinker, you're going to find at times that you disagree with your peers, which people already did at your age, yes, with your peers, with your government, with your school, maybe with your church or synagogue, and your parents. Those aren't easy things to do.
Yeah, well, those are the traits, not just critical thinking, but that's what builds leaders, right? I mean, that's what leadership is based on. And we need that. I mean, we're living in a time where there's a lot of, very black and white thinking, and a lack of nuance and critical reasoning and critical thinking.
Yes.
Confidence to express yourself. That's missing at times.
So anyway, do you remember your athletic career?
Oh, yes. Of course I do. I mean, you have to understand, Mr. Greco, that may have been the highlight of my athletic career. I'm not sure it went any higher. I remember getting to St. Andrews, and listen, we had a good soccer team at Palm Beach State. Don't get me wrong. But I got to St. Andrews and we had a lot of boarding students, many from South American countries, and these guys could play soccer. I remember the first time I took the field, and talk about being humbled. I was quickly humbled. And I realized rapidly that, I might have to learn how to use my left foot if I'm going to play with these guys, because it doesn't work to just use your right foot and kind of pass to yourself anymore. But yes, I that was a big part of my my childhood, and now I'm fortunate because I get to vicariously, start living through my children and play a lot of different sports with them and watch them kind of enjoy the same things that I did.
Now, how old are your girls?
So I have an 8-year-old, soon to turn 9. So she's in 3rd grade. Her name is Mira. And then Asha is a 7-year-old. She's in 1st grade. And then Talia is turning 3 tomorrow.
Oh boy.
So three little ones. They definitely keep me on my toes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. That's great. Who was in your class? Do you stay in touch with any of your former classmates?
I do, although I would like to do even better. So here I get to apologize a second time that I hadn't, been in touch in the last, I'm sheepish to say decade plus. But so Louis Saratsky still lives, actually, well, I shouldn't say still, he lives in the DC area in Northern Virginia.
Where do you live, by the way? Where are you living?
So I'm in Alexandria, Virginia. So
Alexandria.
Right outside of
I went to the University of Maryland, so that's my area around there.
That's your spot. And let me tell you, I mean, as you've probably seen, I don't know if you've been back, but it has grown and developed. I mean, the whole Washington metro area.
The whole area. I remember my sister lived in Tyson's Corners.
Yeah, sure.
That area there. And I remember I'd get lost every time I'd go. I'd get lost because the
it's
traffic.
incredible. It's incredible. I mean, so I've been, since 2003, I've been in the region, and just the continued growth. I kind of joke that I guess as a Washingtonian, it's a good thing to see the growth of Washington. I think for the rest of the country, it's probably a terrible thing. Anyway, so yes, I still see Luis. And then, as I mentioned, I've crossed paths again and reconnected with Alex Rampell in recent years. And let's see, I've seen Benji Hufty Griswold a few times over the years.
Hufty Griswold. Let's see. Was he in your class?
Yes, Benji was. He was one of my closest friends at Palm Beach Day.
Okay, was it you?
So let's see. So you had Virati.
There was someone else.
Ben Liebman was in the class.
We used to have these discussions, and I remember Hufty was always on one side, and you and some others were on the other side. It got pretty heated.
Sounds about right. Our class was a great one. It was a very special group. Jeff Rappaport was in the class. Lauren Lester,
Eric Virati, and
Virati?
Robert. Do you remember Robert?
Of course.
Robert did an interview here, by the way. You want to look in?
Oh, that's great. I'll have to check it out. And actually, I hope I mentioned Virati also did go to St. Andrews. He was in my class.
Robert's mother, Mrs. Virati, taught with me.
That's right.
Here for about 8-9 years.
That's right. I think that started soon, maybe at the very tail end or right after I think I left. I remember that because my younger brother, Ori, was still at Palm Beach Day, I think, at the time. And now you have some of my nieces as well. So.
Yes.
So we continue.
Anyway,
the legacy.
It's I'm so proud of you. The people that come on here, it's when I tell, and some people who look in things, and they're amazed at what has been accomplished. I have one of my first ones was, in fact, I have a few students who I interviewed. They're retiring this year. One who was an MIT professor and was and during the hurricane season, I would see him on television because he was an expert on hurricanes. So during the hurricane season, they'd go to him and he would talk and et cetera. But as I said, so many, Kathy Rampell, of course. Wonderful. Washington Post, New York Times.
I read her stuff. I see her from time to time on Bloomberg Television. Yep, I've followed her as well.
Yeah, and but a number of writers. I've had four PhDs, 3 of them teaching philosophy. Amazing. One at North Carolina, one at Wake Forest, one at Notre Dame. Teaching philosophy it's really gratifying to see that.
Well, all you and a lot of the teachers deserve a lot of the credit. So I really say that because you all left a significant and very positive imprint. Yeah. 2 of my daughters did want to say something to you, Mr. Greco.
Let me hear. I want to hear that.
Hey, I'm going to have to mute myself for a second so I can call down to them. Give me one moment. Can you guys come? All right, the cavalry is coming. Let me unplug my earphones. On over. Now this is gonna make you famous. Come on, quickly. All right. So, what's your name?
My name's Sasha.
And how old are you, honey?
I'm 7.
7. And who's that other one?
I'm Mira.
And how old are you, dear?
I'm almost 9.
Almost 9. Your daddy was one of the brightest kids in my room, and he liked to read. Do you like to read? Do you both like to read?
Yeah.
Both like to read? Okay. He loved to read. And do you like to write?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. You keep writing, and keep reading. Okay.
So what is it that you want to tell Mr. Greco, though? What did I teach you about how you should write on a piece of paper?
Please do not bite my piece of paper.
What's that?
Please don't bite my piece of paper.
They know to keep it within the lines. If there's rules, you're going to keep it in the lines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although if
Okay.
you're typing on the computer, you don't have to keep it in the lines because they're on.
Yeah, you and your computers. That's right. All right. And you got some Mrs.
Let me
Close.
just say one thing to you, Danny. One thing to you. See where they are now?
Yes.
Enjoy them. Enjoy them. Because Danny, you're going to blink and they're going to be gone. You understand?
Yeah.
You're going to
You guys
blink.
get big too fast. Yes.
They're going to be in college and gone, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
You'll still come visit though.
Yeah, and at college, I'll make
Of
myself fried
course.
eggs.
All right.
Okay, ladies, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. You've got to give me a call so we can go out to lunch or dinner. Do you understand?
It's a deal. It's a deal. I'm
Is
on
that a
record. here.
promise?
That is a promise.
That's